Software is made up of a series of screens that generally begin with a logon screen and end up with a thank you come again screen. And we want to be able to model the screens before we actually build them so that we can see where the logos and the icons and the buttons and the text fields go. Using a model, we can move the components around easier before we actually spend all the time and the money and the effort to build the pretty front ends. These screen models can be called wireframes or prototypes or mock-ups or even Windows layout diagrams. I'm going to call them prototypes. You can create the prototypes by hand, but it's a lot more efficient to create them digitally because it gives you the ability to move the components around the screen a whole lot easier than if I've drawn them by hand. Here's an example of a couple of different screen prototypes that are created with a digital online tool. There are a variety of different tools that are available. This is just a list of 4 of them. Mockups, Wireframe Pro, Lucid Charts, and Draw.io. Some online digital tools are free. Some of them are subscription-based that don't cost any money, and some of them do cost money. We're actually going to use the first one on this list, Mockups, and we're going to see if we can recreate the prototype that is on the left. So this prototype appears to be a browser screen. I see a map, I see some buttons, I actually see some text fields and some input boxes and a search field. We're going to see if we can recreate this in Mockups. So I'm going to type mockups.com, M-O-Q-U-P-S, mockups.com into my browser, and it is going to bring me to the main Mockups page. And I'm just going to create a free account. Now this is automatically going to log me in because I've done this a couple of times already today. But it might require you to log in using your Gmail account. Your email through your school is hosted by Gmail. So you can just use your Gmail credentials to log in, or you can just create a free account if you would like. So when I come in here, I have the ability to create new pages. So if I come to the navigation pane on the far left-hand side of the screen, I see that the first icon says stencils, the second icon says pages. I'm going to go to pages and I'm going to click a new page. If you have a unsubscription account, or if you don't register into it, you can only have a certain number of pages. So I'm just going to click on the new page button, and then I'm going to click on stencils, and we're just going to search for some of the stencils that I can drag and drop onto the screen in order to recreate this web browser. I'm actually going to delete this cell phone, and we're going to focus our energies on recreating this browser. So the first stencil that I'm going to look for is browser. I'm going to make sure that I have selected the tab that says stencils on the far left hand side, and then I am just going to type the word browser into the search bar, and this is an example of a browser. I'm going to drop it onto the screen. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I can see that it says Mozilla across the top and mockups.com in the search bar. I can change these kind of features. All I have to do is to double click on it, and I can change the Mozilla. We're going to change it to Envoy, and then I am going to change the URL that it's going to go to. How about if we change it to envoy.com? And then if I click out of it, I can see that it has changed the location, the title of my browser page, and the location that it's going to. So when I look back to this, the next thing that I can see below at the top of the browser are these 4 tabs: Home, Russia, China, and Austria. So we're going to see if we can drop these tabs onto the screen. I'm going to go back into my search bar, and this time I'm going to search for tabs. It makes it a lot easier to search for the type of component that I want to drop on the screen. So I'm going to drop him on the screen. If I double click on him, I have the ability to change what the individual tabs say. So I need Home, Russia, China, and Austria or Australia. If the one that has the asterisk by it will be the one that has the focus on it. So I'm going to put China. I know one of them was Australia, and I believe one of them was India. I should probably get a better memory. So we have 3 countries. The one that had the asterisk by it, what was China, is the one that is going to be darker, that is going to have the tab. So when I come back here to look, the next thing that I see is this giant map. There's a scroll bar above the map. There is a button that says search by map. So we're going to see if we can add these three components starting with the map. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to search for a map, see if it will drop a map. I'm going to bring it in, drop it where I want it to go. I can resize it just by dragging it to resize it. We said the next thing was a scroll bar, and so I'm going to search for a scroll bar. Actually, the component above the map is a slider. So I'm going to search for a slider instead. So I'm going to grab that slider, I'm going to drop it onto the screen. I'm going to drag it so that it's a little bit longer. The slider actually allows me to change where my slider is. And then there was a button above the slider. So the last thing that I'm going to look for is a button, and then I'm going to drag a button onto the screen. If I go back, I can see that the button said search by maps. So I'm going to make my button a little bit bigger. I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to say search by maps. And it looks like we have a little bit of our prototype created so far. But if I go back to the example that I'm trying to recreate, I can see above my search by map button is an envoy title. So I'm going to actually search for a label. And searching for a label is going to allow me to drop a label onto the screen. I'm going to resize it so that the text field is a little bit bigger. And then I am going to change my label to Envoy. And then I'm going to format this text field or this label so that I can increase the font size. The way that I'm going to do that is while I have still selected inside of the text field, I'm going to come up here to the top right hand side of my screen and I'm going to click on the format icon. And this format icon is going to allow me to format this particular component that I'm looking at. One thing that I would like to do is to increase its font size. So I'm going to click on the plus arrow right next to the text, and when I click that plus arrow, it's going to open up that section of the format, and it looks like it is a regular font size 14, and so I'm going to change it to something much larger. How about if we change it to 24, maybe even 30 to make it larger? At this point, I could actually change the color of the field. If I click on the color bar, I can choose a different color. Maybe we could make the text blue. And then when I click away from it, now I have larger text that is blue. So I'm going to come back to the sample that we're trying to do. So now I have the left-hand components all created. If I look at the center components, the thing that I see at the top is a search bar. I'm going to come back into mockups and I'm going to type in the word search and see if we can find a search bar. And then I'm going to drag and drop it onto the screen. Maybe I can resize it. The next thing that I need is another button, and so I'll search for a button again. It might have been a better thing while I had buttons available if I just dragged a couple of them onto the screen, so I'll just put a couple of them here. My button says submit, so I'm going to change the text on my button to say submit. Remember, all I have to do is to double click on the component and it allows me access to the text. Then there is a radio button immediately below that. I see this radio button that says advanced filters. So inside of here, I'm going to type radio button, and then I'm going to drag one in. I'm going to change its size, and then if I double click in here, it allows me to change the text that's inside of it, and it says advanced filters. Again, I have the ability to format the font and the color and the size of each component that I were to click on. So the next thing that I see on here are 6 input text fields, and then the button at the bottom says apply. So what I am looking for is text input. So if I type in my search field text input, I can see that the text input buttons, I can drag and drop some of them on the screen. They're going to come in of a specific size, but it looks like I am going to need to change the size of them so that I can put them side by side. Once I get them the size that I want, I can use my keyboard to Control C to copy, and to paste. So I'm going to drop 4 more of them on here. Paste, copy and paste 4 more of these text fields, and I need 1 more. And then I'm pretty sure that this button down at the bottom was supposed to say apply. So I'm going to change that quickly to say apply. Now if I double click inside of here, it allows me to change the text that goes inside of my input text field. So I need street. This first one is street. The second one is going to be city. All right, so I've updated all 6 of the text in those fields. I know you don't want to watch me do that. So now we have something remotely resembling the example that we're trying to recreate. If I come back to it, mine doesn't seem to be as pretty as theirs, but that's okay. The nice thing about these text boxes, or the nice thing about mock-ups, is that I can line up all of the things. It gives me a grid pattern to show me if I am lined up. So I'm going to make that one a little bit shorter, and I can tell that they're not all exactly lined, but they are close. So the next thing that I want to do is add, this is a text box as well, and then it looks like I have 2 radio buttons across the top, and then way over here on the far left hand side of the screen I have that scroll bar that I had mentioned earlier. So let's put our scroll bar in first, and then we will add the additional components. So I'm going to come up here and look for a scroll bar. When I find it, I am going to drag it and drop it way over here onto the far side of the screen. I am going to increase the width of my tab across the top. I don't have the ability to change the position of where that slider is on that scroll bar, but we are going to add the 2 radio buttons. So let me search for the radio buttons again. I'm going to add 2 of them here at the top, and then we're going to change the text to match my example. All right, so I had to move those a bit to the left so that they would fit on my screen. The last thing that I need to add is what is called a text area. So if I search for a text area, or just search on text, this is an example of a text area. What I'm going to do is I am going to drop it onto my screen, resize it, place it exactly where I want it to go, and then, like all of the other components, if I just double click on it, I can change the text that's inside of it. So if I want to increase the font size in here, all I have to do is go back into my format section over here, and I can increase the font size of all of the text inside of that text area. But there is one additional thing that I notice on my example. It says I love you, and it's blue. I'm assuming that that is a hyperlink. And so I'm going to put that text in here, and if I want to change it to a hyperlink, when I have the text selected, there is a text box that opens up above me to bold, italicize, underline, and one of those allows me to add a hyperlink. So if I click on that button, I could put in a hyperlink to some place. I'm going to put it to mockups.com itself. I could actually add a hyperlink to another page in my mockup so that I could simulate moving from screen to screen to screen just by creating hyperlinks there. When I press the OK button, now I can see that that text is blue, just like a hyperlink would be. So this is my attempt to recreate the wireframe, the prototype that we saw in the sample, using the online mockup tool called mockups.com. As I said before, there are a bunch of tools that you can use to create digital prototypes. This is just a small handful of them. One of the nice things about using a digital tool is that I can quickly and easily move the individual components on the screen. Let's say that after I evaluate it, I say I don't like the positioning of these things. I want to move things around. It is very, very easy to do that. And there are just a ton of stencils that are available to us. If I remove the search, I can just scroll down to see that there are progress bars and date pickers, and there are combo boxes. There are just a ton of different stencils that I can drag and drop onto my screen. If I go all the way down to the stencils, I see at the bottom that there are iOS components, so I can actually drag and drop individual cell phone images onto the screen. And down at the very bottom, I can see I could drop an iPad onto the screen, and then I could begin to place individual components on it. I could drop an iPhone onto the screen, and I could begin to place components. And if I click the Images tab on the far left navigation, I can actually upload individual pictures. Like for instance, if I wanted there to be some kind of a company logo, I could insert an image I can upload an image, and then I can insert it onto my screen. Who doesn't want to have a company logo of a koala? So I'm going to drop this image that I have uploaded earlier as a company logo. I should mention that we also have the ability to change the font color and the background color of each one of the individual components using the format window over here on the side. So if I were to select my background, and if I were to move farther down or scroll down in my format window, I'm going to see that I can change the fill color. So let's just see what happens if I change the fill color to blue. And then I can change this to red. I see that it made my arrows and my forward and back arrows red. And if I change this one, I'm going to change it to, how about if we change it to a green? And it changed the entire background color. I can do that for any of the individual components. I can change their background color. We'll make this one orange. I'll change this search bar. I'll change it to blue. We also have the ability for my map. I can change its drop shadow. And so I can make the drop shadow, let's say if I wanted the drop shadow to be red, now I can see, or red or even green, probably not green because my background is green. I can see that there is a shadow around it. If I scroll down further, notice the term blur, where I can actually turn that out of focus. And so there are just a lot of formatting features that are available in this particular mock-up tool. As I said before, this is just one of many digital prototyping tools. Some that are free and some that are subscription based, and some that you can even add to your Google Drive. It's fun to just spend a little bit of time playing around with the tool and seeing what you can create.